Hi there, I'm Erin. I'm about to go into my second year studying land economy at the University of Cambridge. I originally applied to study economics, but I changed my course halfway through the first term and I'm now doing land economy. And in this video, I am going to be answering a bunch of questions that you guys had about university, about Cambridge, about applications, and a whole host of other things, all student life related. If you manage to come up with a question that I have not covered in this video, then do let me know in the comments, and if there are enough of them, then I'll be doing a part 2 of this to answer even more of your questions. But without further ado, let's answer some questions. I asked you guys to send in some questions on my Instagram and we got a lot of responses. We got several hundred responses. Okay, so the first question is, what is it like applying to Cambridge? How did I actually get in? What is the process like? Now, the first thing I'll say is the process is literally the exact same via UCAS, whether you're domestic or international. So that out the way. First step is obviously submit your UCAS application. Cambridge is very unique in that it's My Cambridge application as well. So you have the potential to add on to your personal statement. They give you, I think, about 400 characters extra that you can put on your My Cambridge application that only Cambridge sees. So that can be really useful if you have additional things that you want to say. I had read a couple of extra books, I'd done a couple of extra competitions that I just really wanted to mention specifically for my Cambridge application, so I put it on there. But this is especially useful if you're applying for a niche degree. So had I been initially applying for land economy, then putting something unique on that My Cambridge application would have been really, really useful. And there are similarly niche degrees that Cambridge does, HSPS for example, that it's worthwhile bearing that in mind. You don't have to put something on here, but I did. And I think sometimes it can be useful too, just if you want to highlight anything else. Then after that, you'll get invited to interview. I think Cambridge interviews roughly 80% of applicants. I think that is a figure for domestic applicants rather than international, but don't quote me on that. But it interviews roughly 80%. And my interview I only had one interview. I had an online interview, so it was via Zoom, and it was petrifying. But it covered a bit of maths, it covered some comprehension, it covered some analytical thinking, and it's basically a lengthy back and forth discussion where you're just trying to say your thought process out loud and they will be challenging you on the things that you are saying. I also had, prior to my interview, I should mention, the TMUA, Test of Mathematics for University Admission, which was the test that Cambridge Economics used and I think still does, and some other universities use it for some different courses, so I also used it for applying to economics and maths in other places. I used it for my LSE application, but then I had also applied to Imperial, side note, which also had an interview and a little test of its own. So the process for Imperial, the economics, finance and data science course, was very similar to the process that I had for Cambridge. But post-interview, the good thing about Cambridge is it tells you the day that it'll let you know whether or not you've gotten in. So that was about mid-January, and I thought I'd failed, but I did get in, so that was very lovely. So the second question that I got a lot is, do you just need good grades to apply to and go to Oxbridge? No, I think the thing that you will see if you have a look at freedom of information requests, for example, is that the vast majority of applicants will have, well, literally every applicant will have the grades advertised on the website, which is normally A star AA or above. The vast majority of applicants will have a star A or 3 A stars or even 4 A stars. And that means that obviously there's got to be other differentiating factors. That is why they interview you, to differentiate, because the vast majority of people applying will have top grades in every subject. So therefore they need a way of separating people. So obviously interview prep, but just being good at talking isn't going to help. You obviously need to know your subject in great depth, and that comes from reading, that comes from entering competitions, that comes from seeking out research opportunities or whatever might come your way. It's just having super curriculars much more than extracurriculars. So I know in the States there's significantly more emphasis placed on extracurriculars, which are everything outside of studies, everything from cross-country to the knitting society to debate or whatever. Whereas Oxbridge seems to focus a lot more on supercurriculars, so things that are still related to your course. Now, obviously things like debate can still be considered supercurricular because they're very related to the vast majority of subjects that you could be studying, whereas things that are more like knitting society are not going to be as important for Oxbridge admissions. So I did myself put a lot of emphasis on the competitions that I was entering, the books that I was reading, work experience that I was trying to get, research opportunities. And I do think that is a big part of the admissions process. How long are the terms at Cambridge? This is a fun one because most universities in the UK will be 10-week terms. They have a reading week. Cambridge has 3 8-week terms. So they condense a lot of information into those 3 8-week terms. So they are quite intense, but it's only 8 weeks long. And someone else on it being quite intense had asked, is party culture less popular due to the higher workload than other universities? I think it very much depends who you're friends with. I know people who have never missed the Wednesday night club night before, and I know people, including myself, who've been clubbing once in the entirety of first year. So it's sort of very dependent on what kind of a person you are. I think that the general consensus is that the clubs in Cambridge are perhaps not as good as in other university towns, but if you're going with your friends, it doesn't really matter. Sticking with some Cambridge questions, we've got how do you choose your college? And how do you know whether your course is right for you? So in terms of choosing a college, for me, I chose purely based off vibes. I'd been to Cambridge once several years before I applied and didn't go to an open day. So I hadn't been around any of the colleges in Cambridge, and I basically chose by looking at what college looked the nicest. I knew I wanted a big college, so that ruled out quite a lot because I basically wanted a John's Trinity size college. I knew I didn't necessarily want to be at Trinity. I don't know why. I just got bad vibes from Trinity, and perhaps therefore it was fate that I ended at John's. But I thought it was big. I thought it was gorgeous. I loved the architecture. I also like the fact that it's a very rich college and it likes to spend on its students. So you get, for example, a £300 grant every year to spend on academic related books, papers, trips. There's a lot of travel grants that the college gives, research opportunity. I just thought it was a very good college to apply to, and I'm very glad that I ended up getting in there. And then in terms of, I suppose this is more general, choosing the right course for you, I may not be the best person to ask because I did choose the wrong course for me, but I think that actually that's given me some good lessons. Do you know what? Because I'm now doing Landec, and that is definitely the kind of course that suits me the most. I think the biggest thing that I will say is just research. Research everything. Even if you look at the name of a course and think, oh, that's probably not for me, have a look at it anyway and just see and think and really break down what it is that you love about a subject. Because what I loved about economics were the practical implications. It was looking at an economic model and thinking not how can I mathematically derive this, but how can I use this in the real world? And I feel like that is a distinction between the economics that you're taught in pure econ versus the economics that I get in Landec. Plus, I've realised that actually I really want that essay writing component. I love the law and I love thinking about, universal basic income, regional inequality, all of these solutions, all of these ideas. So do your research is the moral of the story there. And because land economy is quite a niche degree, I thought I was also, someone asked, is a niche degree for Cambridge worth it? So this person said that they're considering applying for linguistics. So I don't do linguistics. I have a friend who does linguistics and he loves linguistics. And to be honest, I have over this summer read a couple of books. So I was recommended a certain book, The Language Instinct, and I read that and I thought, do you know what, this is actually really quite interesting. So I started reading a couple more books and found some really interesting papers on the use of the changing use of language on the internet, how it's influenced by internet culture and how that manifests itself sort of in the present world as it is rather than online. And it's very, very interesting. So I think niche degrees are absolutely worth it, particularly if it's something that you enjoy. I think the crucial thing with university is it's the first time when you genuinely get the choice of what you're studying. You don't have to do 3 subjects. You don't have to pick maths and English. You can do whatever you want. So pick something that you genuinely enjoy. And I think the big thing nowadays is that, okay, people might be sat there thinking, well, I really enjoy media, but I don't want to go into media. There's job opportunities. The vast majority of grad schemes nowadays, it doesn't really matter unless it's uber technical, what degree you're doing. So if you do a degree you enjoy, then you might have to spend less time on that degree and be able to spend more time with grad applications, for example. So I do think it is just so good to pick what you love. Continuing the theme of Cambridge-based questions, we've got how good is the accommodation in general? In general, it is such a mixed bag. So I was very lucky in my first year. I was very lucky in my first year. I thought I was very lucky. Some people disagree. So there's a building at the back of St John's College, which was built in the 1960s, and it looks very brutalist. It was, in fact, and this is very much a punter fact, but it was the first building in the UK designed using the CAD system, which is quite interesting. So it looks very brutalist. From the outside, it's not as attractive as the rest of John's, absolutely not. But there are massive windows, so you've got gorgeous light in your room, hardwood flooring instead of carpets, and I was very lucky to have an ensuite. And it's a very clean building, it's beautiful, so I was very lucky with that. There are other buildings and within John's and other colleges that just aren't as nice. Some of the rooms are really quite tiny. So there was a Queen's accommodation block, which I'm pretty sure is getting refurbed, but Alstone, and that was really quite tiny. There are some really quite tiny ones at Clare College as well. So it very much depends. And in your first year, it is a little bit of a ballot system. Well, I don't want to say ballot system because ballot system is what you then actually use in second year and third year. So it's quite random. Some colleges will give you the opportunity to put down what your preferred is, others sort of allocate it to you. So yeah, the accommodation is a mixed bag at Cambridge, and you've got to expect that some of the buildings are really old. So some of the rooms are really old. So some of the plumbing and the heating is really old. So it gets cold and hot. And you've got to be prepared, essentially. That is a reason for choosing some of these newer colleges. So Churchill, for example, has really good accommodation. And it's one of those newer colleges that some people don't really pick, but it's the trade-off between old, beautiful buildings on the outside versus rooms that perhaps aren't very modernised on the inside. And then on that as well, opinions on all-girls colleges. So there are two all-girls colleges at Cambridge, Newnham and Murray Edwards, Medwards. And first of all, Newnham is one of the most gorgeous colleges in Cambridge. So architecturally, that's amazing. And the kitchens are insane. If you picture a kitchen that you would think of in like a Kensington townhouse, that is the Newnham kitchen. They're gorgeous. I've not really been inside at Medwards, but I am doing a summer program this year where I'm going to be staying at Medwards for a bit, so I'll be able to add to the reviews on that. The people that I know at girls' colleges generally do enjoy it, but I think it's very dependent on the person. Like, for example, I would not have wanted to go to an all-girls college because I went to an all-girls grammar school for secondary school, and just don't want the replication of that environment, to be quite frank. But it works differently for different people, and I think that it's just so personal as to whether or not you would thrive in that environment or not. But obviously, you're not doing everything all the time with your college. So your course is still mixed, your friendship groups can still be mixed, sports and other societies. So it depends. I suppose the benefit is if you have a shared bathroom in an all-girls college, might be preferable. Okay, an honest insight into the work-life balance at Cambridge. It is a balancing act, that is for sure. There is a lot of work and there is a lot of life. So on the work side of things, obviously Cambridge packs pretty much the same, if not more, into 8 weeks that other universities will do in 10 weeks. So it is very intense. So some days I will have 3 hours of lectures, plus a supervision. So I could have 4 contact hours in a day. And I have lectures pretty much every day. This year I didn't have lectures on a Thursday, for example, but I would still have my sort of 8 hours of lectures. So there is a lot of work, and obviously for supervisions, that's pre-reading, that's doing your super work, that's going away and sort of working on it, marking it afterwards, whatever. So there's a lot of work, and to just stay on top of things, and they assign you an obscene amount of reading if you're in a more humanities-based subject. But it's all very good. However, on the other side, there's a lot of socials. So because Cambridge is a sort of city where it's all built around the university is so central. All the colleges are central, with the exception of like Girton and Homerton. But even the Hill colleges are really central to Cambridge, right? So all of your socials are happening in a really small space. So it's really easy for you to, in 10 minutes, get from your room to literally any social venue that you'll have to get to. And that makes it quite easy for you to overcommit. So it can be hard to find a balance between the amount that you're working and the amount that you're going to be socialising, going out with friends, attending societies. But I think that's the case at most universities. It is hard to find your own personal balance. For me, it took the entire year to find a personal balance, and I'm hoping that going into second year, I'm going to have found it, but I might not have. So again, it depends how much you want to commit. But I think the implication of some of these questions is that it's work, 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 and that is so not the case. There are people who just are out all the time, not necessarily at clubs, but at societies, going and doing sports, going and attending speeches or events or talks or whatever. There's so much going on in Cambridge, which I suppose is a massive benefit. But you just have to limit your involvement with it so that you are able to keep up on your work, of course. Okay, so someone asked a bit of a more general question. What are the differences between the colleges? So in Cambridge, you'll be in a college, you'll live in a college, you'll eat in a college. All your lectures will be provided centrally. So your department will provide the lectures. Depending on your department, either your college or your department provides supervision. So for example, I had 2 different experiences of this. With economics, the college provided my supervisions. So my supervisor was determined by the college that I went to, and was organised by the college itself. Now with land economy, the supervisions are organised centrally. So either there's one supervisor or I pick my supervisor, and my supervisions will be with people from other colleges, not just my own college. And so that depends. If it is college focused, then obviously all your supos are going to be college based. If not, they won't be. But the difference between the colleges is obviously the looks. Then also the size is something to consider, whether you want a larger or a smaller college. The accommodation, so whether all your accommodation is on the site of the college itself or sort of spread across Cambridge. When I say spread across Cambridge, I mean it very loosely. Cambridge is not a big place. You'll never really be more than 15 minutes out. But that is something to consider if you'd rather be closer to the dining hall, for example. Then there are sort of smaller differences. So for example, John's has a formal in the big hall, like 5 or 6 nights a week. Some colleges will have it only once a week or once every couple of weeks. A lot of colleges will dine So we'll have their dinner at the same time, or not at the same time, but at the same day that there'll be a formal in the hall. So what that means is you have really early dinner slots. Now John's doesn't. John's has a buttery, which is separate to the actual dining hall. I know I'm giving you like loads of things, but basically there's a canteen and then there's a really fancy dining hall. And most of the time you're going to eat in the canteen, right? But at John's it's separate, and at most colleges the fancy dining hall is also the canteen, if that makes sense. So that is something to consider. And obviously the quality of the accommodation will differ, the proximity to your lectures, the proximity to sports centres, the proximity to the college sport facilities. So for John's, they're basically on site, Churchill, they're on site, but other colleges like Queen's or Peterhouse, they're all off site. So you've got to sort of go some distance if you want to do college sport. Okay, someone asked more quantifiably, like what is my workload actually like in terms of numbers? So I'll run through what it was generally like for Landic for first year. And I would have 8 hours of lectures every week. So I'd have 4 2-hour lectures. I would generally have 1 or 2 supervisions a week, each supervision lasting an hour. Now, after a 2-hour lecture, I would probably spend 2 to 4 hours reviewing the content. And before a 2-hour lecture, I would probably spend about 2 hours reading, because we had quite a lot of pre-reading for lectures. 2 to 4 hours, perhaps not after every, but after, for example, maybe I should say like 1 to 2 hours after every 2-hour lecture, but after every block of 2 2-hour lectures, so 4 hours of lectures, I would probably spend about 4 hours out of lectures, like reviewing notes and making sure I know the principles. Then for supervision, so obviously the supervisions themselves are an hour, depends on what I was doing in the supervision. So for some supers, I would have pre-reading and then we would discuss in the supervision. That was like more the setup for my law supervisions. So I would probably spend 6 hours pre-reading and preparing for those sorts of supervisions. When I have an essay, I would probably spend the same amount of time reading and preparing, but I'd also probably spend an hour to 2 hours writing that essay as well. So that is quite a lot. When you add it all up, it is pretty much like they say you should be working the equivalent hours of a full-time job, so 40, 50, 60 hours a week of studying. And that doesn't feel like too much when you're doing it, don't get me wrong, but it can be a lot. And again, this is where my point of balance really does come in. I had a lot of questions about what prospective applicants could be doing to make their application stand out. And well, that's obviously going to differ for different subjects. The biggest piece of advice that I can give you is you're competing with people who are at the top of their school. Pretty much everyone who's applying is amongst the top students at their school for the subject that they're applying for. So you need to show that you are of a high caliber beyond your grades. And how you show that is up to you. But you need to show that in a way that comes across with passion. So whether that is you reading lots and lots of academic articles, lots of books, and for example, writing a review for the school magazine or starting your own blog about them, that's something incredible you could do. Whether that looks like you entering lots of essay competitions and doing well on them, amazing. Whether that's you entering science competitions like the Big Bang competition, showcasing your engineering skills, whether that's you having a GitHub portfolio full of lots of different coding projects, something that shows that you genuinely have passion for the subject and that backs up your academic credentials beyond just your grades. I know that sounds generic, but that is because what will make you stand out is personal to you. There is no prescribed, this is going to make you stand out, because even if it's something really impressive, if when questioned about it in an interview, you seem a bit passive and you're not that passionate about it, that's going to come across. And they're going to want somebody who is genuinely passionate and genuinely wants to study and learn more and develop their understanding. Because at the end of the day, Oxbridge, these institutions, they are research institutions. They want students who are going to contribute and students who are willing to be taught and willing to learn. And as long as you can show that, then that is what really makes you stand out. What is your average day like at Cambridge? So this differed so much during the year, but I basically got a plan for what I hope my average day at Cambridge is going to look like for the upcoming year based upon what it sort of began to look like during Easter term and the bottom end of Lent term. For that, the first term at Cambridge is Michaelmas, second term is Lent, third term is Easter. So 3-week terms, Michaelmas, Lent, Easter. Just to clarify, so I'm not using a bunch of Cambridge jargon. So generally, I'm an early bird. I like to be up early. I intend to do a mix of cross-country and swimming next year. So cross-country running leaves generally from outside John's at about 7:20 and will be for an hour. So that's quite nice. So I'd either be doing that or there's some swim training in the morning. If not, my alarm goes off about 6:30 anyway. I just go to the gym on my own or go for a run on my own. And then I would sort of be back at about 8 o'clock, 8:20, 8:30, have a shower. I don't have many 9 a.m.s this year. I think I only have one 9 a.m. a week, which I'm so grateful for, because with economics, it was a 9 a.m. every single day. Landec is a little more chill on the timings, I must say. But I will generally spend the morning, if I don't have a 9 a.m., then I'm straight to John's library and I will be doing reading. I like to do readings in the morning when my brain is fresh, when I can read it and really critically think about it. And then I'll be off to my lectures. I think this year I have a bunch of 2-hour lectures and 2 days where I have 3 hours of lectures. So a 2-hour lecture and then a 1-hour lecture, like back to back, which will be interesting, but those are going to be my lectures. I'll hear a lecture straight away after. I like to review. Pretty much, I will very rarely have something else to do immediately after a lecture. So I'll set aside about an hour and a half to just review and make sure that I understand the content. Then I'm trying to get better at making my own lunches. I would go to the buttery quite a lot, or there's a college that's right next to the sort of site where the majority of my lectures were last year, Selwyn College, which has a great buttery, which I would go to for lunch. And there are various cafes around Cambridge that I like to study in. So I went out for lunch quite a lot last year. I'm going to try and go back to my room for lunch and just cook my own lunch, I think, save a bit of money this year. But then my afternoons, I will generally kind of go to the gym for about half an hour. I like to have an afternoon pick-me-up. I just find like as soon as I get moving, I feel so much better. I feel so much more able to continue with my studies, because then I will pretty much study until dinner. And I will try and arrange for some sort of social event, whether that is the entrepreneurs, whether that is going to Caledonian Society, shout out CalSoc. If you're coming to Cambridge, come to CalSoc, that's great. Or again, like swimming or running that they do in the evenings, or just going out with friends, just going to someone's room, just getting dinner together, whatever. But I would try and concentrate my socials in the evening once I've done all of my work for the day. That is about as many questions I can do without the storage of my camera running out. So if you have any more questions, then do let me know in the comments of this video. There are a couple of extra questions from the Instagram that people submitted that I do want to answer in a second video. So I will be making part 2, and that'll be coming out later on this week. If you are thinking of applying for Cambridge, then let me know what course and college in the comments, and I'll see if I can like get one of my friends who's doing that course at that college to get in contact with you and just help you with the applications process. There's so many people at Cambridge that I know who've been like, oh, you know, if any of your followers actually want help with the admissions process, then by all means tell me. So I have a lot of people who would be willing to do that, and I myself definitely. If you want to apply for Landec at John's, then I'm so ready to help you. Or economics actually, because I did go through the economics admissions process. So that's all for this video. I really hope it's helped dispel some myths about Cambridge, tell a bit more about student life here, and I will see you in the next video.